Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here because we're about to unpack something truly miraculous. Think about this for a second. Right now, you probably have a web browser eating, 20 gigabytes of RAM for absolutely no reason? And your computer is likely running 400 other background programs at the exact same time. Yet somehow, when you wiggle your mouse, that little cursor moves perfectly and instantly across the screen. You guys, this is not normal. It is a literal miracle performed thousands of times per second by the single most underappreciated piece of software ever written, the operating system. Now, like any good computer science professor will tell you, the absolute best way to understand a wildly complex system is to just follow its timeline. So here is our syllabus for today. We'll start with 1, waking up the machine, then 2, security rings and virtual memory. After that, 3, interacting with the world, 4, the life of a process, and finally 5, rage quit and shutdown. Basically, we're going to trace the exact chronological lifespan of a computer session all the way from absolute zero at power on to completely shutting the whole thing down. To really appreciate where we are today, ask yourself, how does your CPU handle those 400 programs without just catching fire? Way back in 1956, General Motors shipped the first operating system, the GM Nio. And get this, it ran exactly 1 program at a time. Zero memory protection, no user accounts, no files. And incredibly, it still crashed less than Windows Millennium Edition. But today's systems, they're juggling hundreds of tasks totally seamlessly. So, to understand how they pull that off, we have to start right at the beginning. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, waking up the machine, or the boot sequence. Imagine the absolute zero moment, the exact millisecond you press the physical power button on your machine. Electricity hits the motherboard, and the CPU wakes up in its most primitive, completely empty state. No files, no memory management, nothing. Just raw silicon waiting for a spark of life. Waking up is basically this incredibly precise relay race. Step 1, power flows. Step 2, the primitive firmware wakes up. This is your UEFI or the old-school BIOS. Its only job is to turn on just enough hardware to find a disk and hand the baton over to Step 3, the bootloader. If you're on Linux, that's grub. On Windows, it's bootmgr. The bootloader is incredibly single-minded. It just searches the disk for the core of the operating system, called the kernel, loads it straight into RAM, and boom! Step 4, handoff complete. Moving right along to Section 2, security rings and virtual memory, or establishing the laws of physics. So the kernel is finally awake, but right now it's basically a system engineer standing in an empty field. Everything interesting, Windows, files, your apps, they don't exist yet. The kernel has to build the system's guardrails totally from scratch in a few milliseconds, establishing the laws of physics before the whole machine just bursts into flames. To prevent total chaos, the CPU enforces security using these things called privilege rings. The kernel runs in ring 0. Now, this is the Wild West. It's written in low-level C code, and it has full, completely unrestricted access to the hardware. Literally, one run pointer here, and your entire machine crashes, which, by the way, is exactly why kernel developers drink heavily. On the other side, we have ring 3, the user space. This is where your everyday applications run, and it's heavily restricted. If a buggy program crashes in ring 3, it usually only takes itself down, because it's trapped safely inside a sandbox. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that to make this whole sandboxed system work, the operating system has to orchestrate a brilliant scam. Seriously, it's a total scam. It's called virtual memory. When a program asks for memory, the OS doesn't actually give it real physical RAM chips. Nope, it gives it a fake address. A piece of hardware called the Memory Management Unit, or MMU, instantly translates this fake virtual address into a real physical one totally behind the scenes. Because of this lie, every single process thinks it owns all the memory in the world. It creates these perfect parallel universes for your apps. So your web browser absolutely cannot read your password manager's memory. They exist in totally separate realities. And if an app asks for a chunk of memory, which we call a page, that isn't currently in the RAM, the MMU triggers a page fault. The kernel quietly wakes up, fetches the data from your hard drive, drops it into RAM, and lets the program continue like nothing ever happened. It is an absolute invisible miracle. And hey, speaking of your hard drive, at its absolute lowest level, a disk is just a massive line of numbered blocks. The file system is the software that lies to you, presenting nice, neat little folders instead. It does this using index nodes, which hold metadata like permissions and point to the actual data. Notice I didn't say file names? File names are just special directories that map to index nodes. Plus, modern file systems use something called journaling. They write down their intentions before moving data. So if your cat yanks the power cord out mid-save, you don't end up with corrupted garbage. All right, Section 3, interacting with the world, drivers and interrupts. So our system has memory and files now, but it's completely isolated in a box. It needs to handle physical reality. Let's talk about how the operating system actually interacts with external hardware. See, the kernel needs to talk to your GPU, your Wi-Fi card, your mouse. This is where device drivers come in. But every hardware chip speaks a totally different, confusing language. Drivers translate generic kernel requests into those specific chip hieroglyphics. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. Drivers run in that ultra-privileged ring 0 we talked about earlier. This means a single buggy driver, like a bad graphics driver or, say, a faulty CrowdStrike update, can bring down the entire global economy with the blue screen of death.
So the hardware is connected. But think about this for a second. When you start typing, how does the computer instantly know? Does the OS just sit in an infinite loop, constantly asking the keyboard, "Hey, did you press a key yet? How about now? Now?" Of course not. That would be a terrible waste of CPU resources. Instead, it relies on tiny electrical screams. I'm completely serious. The hardware fires an interrupt. It's a literal electrical signal sent straight to the CPU that just yells, "Hey, something happened. Deal with it." The CPU immediately drops whatever it's doing, jumps to an interrupt handler inside the kernel, processes your keystroke, and goes right back to work. Your computer's snappy responsiveness is entirely driven by these tiny electrical screams. On to Section 4, the life of a process, or what I call the hero's journey. With the hardware finally tamed, the kernel is fully operational, but it's completely alone. It needs to spawn the user space, so it creates PID1, Process ID 1. On Linux systems, this is usually systemd. Think of it as the grand ancestor of every single other program on your machine. But remember, PID1 runs in the restricted ring 3, which means from this moment on, every single process must ask the kernel for permission to do anything. Let's move to and see how this builds into the timeline of a process navigating the system's rules. This really is a hero's journey. A process is born from an ancestor, it navigates the rigid rules of the system using system calls, it fights for CPU time against hundreds of other processes and scheduling, it talks to its peers via IPC, and eventually, well, it meets its termination.
But how does a process stuck in the restricted ring 3 actually get anything done? Well, it uses system calls. A process can't just reach out and grab a file from the disk. The CPU will physically block it. Instead, it triggers a special instruction, a system call, that forces a physical switch from ring 3 back to ring 0. The kernel checks if the process has permission, does the dangerous work on its behalf, and returns the result safely. This physical boundary, it's the only reason your computer is actually secure.
Now, you might have 400 processes running, but only an 8-core CPU. So how does that work? Enter the scheduler. Imagine an air traffic controller at a wildly busy airport. The airplanes are your processes, and the runways are your CPU cores. The scheduler decides who gets to land and execute, and it often uses super complex rules like earliest eligible virtual deadline first. This ensures every single application gets its fair slice of CPU time without the whole system lagging. Sometimes an app needs to multitask internally. It can use threads which share the exact same memory space. But a quick warning, sharing memory is literally like pointing a loaded gun at your foot. If two threads try to overwrite the same variable simultaneously, you get a catastrophic race condition. Alternatively, entirely separate processes can use IPC, inter-process communication. They use safe tools like pipes, which were invented way back in 1973, by the way, to pass a stream of bytes from one process to another without ever sharing that dangerous memory space.
And that brings us to Section 5, Rage Quit and Shutdown, the end of days. We have finally reached the end of our life cycle. You've done your work, the system has balanced millions of page faults and hardware interrupts, and now you hit the shutdown button. It is the end of days for the operating system.
When you initiate a shutdown, that ancestor process, PID1, steps right back up. It sends a polite signal called sigterm to every running process. It basically says, "Excuse me, please save your state and wrap up." A well-behaved program will clean up its toys and exit. But if a process hangs, a timeout occurs. And then comes sigkill. This is ruthless. It is game over. The kernel forcefully terminates the process. No questions asked.
So, the crucial point is this final rapid-fire shutdown checklist. Just watch how fast this happens. 1. The file system quickly flushes its journals to prevent corruption. 2. Drivers release their grip on the hardware. 3. The kernel forcefully syncs any remaining memory to the disk. 4. Those tiny electrical screaming interrupts, they're disabled, completely silencing the hardware. And 5, the CPU is commanded to halt. The firmware cuts the power and your screen goes totally black.
And there you have it, the incredibly complex, beautifully orchestrated lifespan of an operating system. Next time you press that power button, I really hope you take just a second to recognize the thousands of invisible miracles, the strict security rules, and the brilliant lies happening right under your keyboard. You now finally understand the magic under the hood. Class dismissed, you are finally free to go outside and touch some grass. Thanks so much for learning with me.